Bonjour, bienvenue à toutes et à tous.
Good
Merci de vous
morning.
être
Welcome.
inscrits si
Thank
nombreux à
you
cette version
for
digitale de notre
registering. So
Shippers
many of
meeting.
you registered to attend
Yes,
the
some of you may
virtual
rather follow
meeting
this meeting in English.
today.
You may do so by clicking on the corresponding flag on the lower part of your screen. And fortunately or
If you'd like to
unfortunately,
listen to this in
these will be
English,
my last
please
words
click
in
on
English for this
the
session. L'année dernière déjà,
flag to
nous
do
avions
so.
dû, au dernier moment,
Last year,
renoncer
at the
à vous
last
rencontrer
minute,
pour de bon
we weren't
et
able
adopter une
to meet
version
you.
digitale pour notre événement.
We
Vous
had
nous aviez
to
fait
have
de
a
très bons
remote
retours,
version
je
of
vous en
our
remercie.
event,
Et je dois vous
and
dire
you gave us some
que
great
ça nous
feedback,
console un
so
peu d'avoir
thank you
dû,
for that.
encore une fois, prendre la décision de vous
But
rencontrer
we
uniquement virtuellement.
unfortunately had to
Néanmoins,
make the
je
same
pense que vous
decision
allez
this year
pouvoir
to meet
interagir
virtually. Nevertheless, I
facilement
think that you
avec
are
nous.
going to be able to
Vous pouvez
interact
poser
easily
vos
with us.
questions dans la partie droite
Your
de votre écran
questions are
et
welcome.
nous
You
y
can ask
répondrons
them on the
après chaque
right-hand side
session.
of your screen, and we will
Vous
answer
pouvez
them after
aussi
each
nous
session.
donner votre avis. Vous savez
You can
combien
also
c'était
give us
important
your
pour nous.
opinion.
Ça ne sera
You know how
qu'un
important
clic
it is
et
for
je vous
us.
invite à
You just
répondre
have to
après chaque
click,
session à
and
la question
you
qui
can do
sera
that
posée.
and answer the
Nous
question after
avons
each
adapté
session.
le format de ce
We
rendez-vous
have
pour condenser le
adapted the
contenu sur
format of this
une
meeting to
matinée.
try to condense
On
the
va pouvoir
content
parler de
to
l'offre et
just one
l'acheminement
morning.
jusqu'à
We're going
10h45,
to be
puis nous ferons
talking
une ouverture sur
about
les gaz
supply and
renouvelables à
delivery until
partir de
about
11h,
10:45,
et
then
Thierry
renewable
Trouvé,
gases from
notre
11 a.m.
directeur
with
général,
Thierry
viendra
Trouvé,
clore la matinée.
our General
Je vous
Director, will
propose de
close
commencer
off
par un
this
retour sur
morning's
cette année
session. I would
2020,
like to begin by
année
looking back on
certes
this year,
difficile et
2020. It
compliquée
was a
pour tous, pour vous,
difficult and
pour nous,
complicated year for
mais au cours de
everybody,
laquelle
for
les
you, for
femmes et les hommes
us.
de GRT Gaz ont
But
pu
during this
mener
year,
à
the
bien
men and women of
de petits et
GRT
de grands
Gas were
projets.
able
Et c'est ce
to
que nous avons retrouvé
nevertheless
dans la
carry out
vidéo que je vous
small and
propose de
large
regarder
projects. And this is
maintenant.
what we have summarized in a video that I am going to show you now.
Voilà pour 2020. 2020, année Covid, mais au cours de
That
laquelle
was
ensemble, nous
2020,
avons
the
relevé beaucoup
COVID year,
de
but
défis.
together we
En
have managed to
complément, je voudrais
tackle
vous
many
donner
different
quelques
challenges.
chiffres sur
Additionally, I would like to
cette
give
année
you
passée.
a few
Une
figures
année qui a été
about
marquée
this
par une
year.
consommation de gaz en
It
France en
was
baisse de
marked
7% à
by a gas
445
consumption in France
TWh.
that was down
La crise
7%,
Covid s'est ajoutée à
445
un
terawatt
climat
hour.
exceptionnellement doux,
With the COVID
avec
crisis, we have an
des
exceptionally
approvisionnements
mild
qui ont un
climate
petit peu
as well,
changé. Les importations
and
gazoducs ont atteint leur
supply
plus bas niveau depuis
changed.
2010. Par contre,
Import
après
was
l'année
the lowest since
2019 record, les
2010,
importations de GNL
but
ont
after a
continué à
record
être
year in
bien soutenues,
2019,
en
LNG imports
particulier
continued
lors
to
des
be
9 premiers mois de
buoyant,
2020. Ensuite, au
especially in the
dernier
first
trimestre,
9
la
months
hausse
of
des prix
2020.
asiatiques a
In the
rappelé
last
les
quarter,
carburants
rising
vers
Asian
l'extrême-orient,
prices
avec une baisse de
diverted
40%
cargoes
pour la
from
France. Nous
Europe,
avons enregistré
minus
une baisse des
40%
transits
for
vers l'Italie et
France.
l'Espagne,
There was
et
also
le
a
bilan a été complété par
reduced
une
transit
hausse
to
des
Italy
soutirages en
and Spain,
provenance des stockages
along
souterrains
with an
qui a
increase in
été rempli
withdrawals from
très
underground
fortement en début
storage,
d'hiver du fait de prix spot
with
soutenus
high
en
filling
décembre.
rates at the beginning of the winter, with high spot
L'activité a aussi
prices in
continué
December.
de façon dynamique sur les terminaux méthaniers. On a
Dynamic
enregistré
business continuity
276
as well
appels de
for
navires en
methane
2020 sur les
terminals,
4 terminaux
276 ship
raccordés
calls
au
in
réseau
2020 at the
de
4
GRT Gaz,
LNG
un peu moins que
terminals
les
connected to the
322
GRT
de
gas
2019,
network, a little
et
bit less than the
195 TWh ont
322 in
été injectés dans le
2019,
réseau,
and
là aussi un peu moins que les
495 terawatt hours
232,5
injected
de
into the grid,
2019.
just a bit
À
less than the
l'opposé, le GNL
232.5
carburant
in
et le GNL
2019.
porté ont enregistré
LNG
un très
fuel
fort développement, avec 11
grew very
149
strongly.
chargements de camions-citernes en 2020. C'est
11,149
30% de
LNG
plus que
tankers filled in
2019.
2020, which is 30%
Nous
more than in
avons aussi
2019.
poursuivi, malgré les conditions,
We
un
have
programme d'investissement
also
soutenu pour assurer la sécurité
continued our
d'approvisionnement, la
sustained
transition
investment to
énergétique
ensure
et la
security of
fiabilité du réseau.
supply and
Au
to
total,
develop
nous avons
the
investi
energy transition and
386 millions
the
d'euros en
grid's
2020.
fluidity, with
155 millions
386
d'euros pour
million
la
euros
maintenance et la
invested in
sécurité,
2020,
40
155
millions
for
d'euros pour la
maintenance and
transition
security,
énergétique, la
40
montée en
million
puissance
euros
du
for the
biométhane,
energy
le
transition,
GNV, le
ramping up
bioGNV, des
biomethane,
projets d'éthique pour
NGV,
l'hydrogène, la
bio-NGV,
pyrogazéification et la
project
gazéification
studies for
hydrothermale.
hydrogen,
Nous avons investi
pyrogasification, and
102 millions
hydrothermal
d'euros dans la
gasification. We have
fluidification et
invested
la continuité
102 million
d'approvisionnement,
euros in the
un renforcement
fluidification
de
and
la Bretagne
continuity of
Sud pour
supply.
raccorder
We have
une centrale
strengthened
sud
South
combinée à
Brittany
l'indivision, la poursuite de la
with the
conversion
combined
gaz-B,
cycle power
gaz-H
plant
dans le nord de la
connection. We
France,
have continued with
des
our
raccordements et des travaux
B-gas,
ferroviaires.
H-gas conversion,
Enfin,
along with
last but
connections
not
and
least,
work for third
nous avons
parties.
investi 71 millions d'euros
Last but not
dans
least, we have
notre
also
système
invested 71
d'information,
million euros
qui
in
devrait
our
se
IT
ressentir dans
system,
votre expérience très bientôt.
and you should
Si
be
nous
able
regardons vers
to
l'avenir,
see that
nous
for
travaillons
yourselves very
aujourd'hui
soon. If we
sur
now look
deux axes
towards the future, we
principaux
are currently
pour nous
working on
adapter
two main
et
areas
freiner,
to
si possible, la
adapt
poursuite de la baisse des
and slow
consommations.
down
Le premier
the
axe,
further
c'est
decline in
il s'agit
consumption
d'asset
if
management.
possible. The first
Nous
pillar
changeons de
is asset
perspective et nous nous
management.
projetons sur des
We are changing
consommations en
a
baisse,
perspective
en
by
ligne
looking
avec
towards
les objectifs
lower
de
consumption,
transition
reduced
énergétique.
consumption,
Nous
in
cherchons à
line
ne
with
garder que
our
les éléments du
energy
réseau
transition
indispensables.
goals. We want
On
to
trouve des pistes pour faire des
try to just
économies
keep the
et on trouvera
essential
des pistes
elements of the
pour
network to
convertir
find ways to make
le moment
savings, and
venu
we will
des
find
actifs à
ways
l'hydrogène.
to
Nous
convert
continuons bien
assets to
entendu à
hydrogen.
travailler sur les
We
autres
are
gaz,
also
les gaz
continuing to
renouvelables.
work on other
Le premier,
gases,
c'est
renewable
le
gases,
biométhane.
for
Deux idées
example.
en tête:
Firstly,
bien
with
faire notre
biomethane, with
métier
two
et bien
ideas in
raccorder les
mind: doing
producteurs
our job
directement à
well
notre réseau
and connecting
ou
producers
indirectement quand ils
directly
sont
to
sur le
our
réseau de
network,
GRDF
or
avec les bypass.
indirectly if they are
Et
with
nous comptons
GRDF
continuer à jouer
networks with
notre rôle de
bypasses.
soutien
And
de la
we would
filière
also like to
en
continue playing
participant
our role
activement
by
à la
supporting the
définition
sector
et à
with active
l'optimisation des nouveaux
participation
mécanismes de
in the
soutien,
definition
comme
and
les tarifs de
optimization
rachat
of
ou
new support
éventuellement les tarifs.
mechanisms such as
Nous
Meta9 and
travaillons
new
aussi,
methane
et c'est à
or
beaucoup plus long
feed-in
terme,
tariffs. We are
sur
also
l'hydrogène. On en parle
working in
beaucoup,
the longer
je
term
comprends
on
que ça peut
hydrogen.
inquiéter.
We talk about this a
Nous nous
lot, and I
engageons
know
à
that it
vous
may
concerter
cause
très
concern,
largement
but
sur
we
le
are
sujet,
committed to
partager
having a
pour
large
arriver à une
consultation on
compréhension
this
commune
subject,
des
shared
enjeux de ce nouveau
consultation, so that we
vecteur
have a shared
énergétique
understanding
pour
of
que
the
tout le monde
challenges for this
puisse
new energy vector, so
l'aborder
that
de façon
everybody
confortable pour le futur.
can
Je
be
n'oublie pas
comfortable with this for the
le
future,
gaz dans les transports.
without
La mobilité
forgetting
gaz,
gas
c'est un
in
coup prix.
transport
C'est un
as
coup
well.
prix
Gas
pour le climat
mobility
et pour nous.
is
Dans un premier temps,
great for the climate
avec un
and for
fort gain sur
us.
la
Firstly,
pollution quand on
with
remplace le diesel
gains
ou l'essence
in
par du
the
gaz
amount of
naturel.
pollution,
Et
for
dans un
example, if
second
you
temps, pour le
replace
CO2,
diesel
si
and
on
petrol
remplace
with
le gaz
natural gas,
naturel
and for
par du
CO2
bio.
as well, if you're replacing
Ça nous
natural gas with
permettra,
bio.
en
This
forçant
means
sur ce segment en développement,
that By looking towards this growing sector, we can better develop our capacity, and this will be advantageous for tariffs as well. Of course, we are not forgetting our core business, the management and development of a TRF offer that everybody likes, and that will continue. we have seen that it wasn't as enlisted last year, and this means that TRF costs have gone down, which was to your advantage, and we will continue to optimize this as well. This also involves having a more better performing network, and we are working on this, and you will see this through the morning. To tell you a little bit more about all of this, I'm going to give the floor to Barbara and Ruben. Thank you. Good morning. I am Ruben Parisi from the GRT Gas Marketing Department. I'm going to be talking about TRF in 2020 as well as the projects for the coming years. Good morning, everybody. I am Barbara Pichot. I also work at the GRT Gas Marketing Department. I'm here to ask a few questions during this presentation to Ruben. At the end of his presentation, I will be asking some questions that you may have asked in the chat as well. So don't hesitate to send us your questions through his presentation. To start, the first question, Ruben. 2020 was marked by the COVID crisis. Of course, could you tell us how the TRF reacted in terms of prices and flows? Yes, thank you, Barbara, for this question. TRF responded well. It was able to absorb the excess surplus of gas created by this COVID crisis. The consumption went down because of health restrictions. For example, 20% reduction in April compared to what the normal rate is, and there was a very comfortable supply, especially in LNG, and this created a surplus of gas. TRF was able to absorb this, which meant that the gas was 9.2 euros per megawatt hour, a record level, and PEG remained correlated to the TTF in Europe, which has increased and shown the TRF's ability to absorb this excess gas in the winter as well. When the weather turned colder, consumption started again, there was less LNG, so the price went up again, but it remained reasonable nevertheless. As well as being correlated and connected to the other European liquid hubs, the TTF, for example, if you compare the PEG in terms of the price, you can see that it was the cheapest, which is good news for the consumer and for the competitivity of gas as well. Cautionary point about LNG, and this is why the PEG price was so low in 2020, was because the TRF attracted a lot of LNG. The first destination in the Northwest Europe liquid markets, and the second behind Spain, with LNG structural needs. Specifically, the TRF absorbed a lot of LNG at the start of the summer, the spike of this supply. Why was the TRF able to absorb this much LNG? But there are several reasons for this. Firstly, the TRF had 4 methane terminals. The TRF is also connected to other marketplaces as well, with different input-output points, which means that you can optimize the LNG flow that's coming in to the TRF. And we also have an efficient storage system as well, which played a amortizer role, really. And you can see on this graph the storage levels over 2019, 2020, and then 2021, 2021. Over the summer, you can see the injection was much faster compared to last year. This was in order to absorb all of the gas that was available. We can also see that in the winter, withdrawal was
pour faire
much
face
faster
aux
than
vagues de
last
froid
year to
et
face up
à la baisse
to
assez
the
significative de
colder weather
l'importation
and
de
the
LNG. Donc
significant
ça a été un
decrease of
facteur
LNG
pour limiter la
imports.
hausse du
So
prix
that
du
was
PEG
a factor
au
which
cours de l'hiver,
restricted the
malgré
PEG's
le
price
moindre
increase
approvisionnement
throughout the
et cette plus
winter,
forte demande.
despite the higher
J'ai
demand.
parlé aussi du fait que la
I
TRF
also
proposait de
mentioned
nombreux points
the fact that the
d'interconnexion avec
TRF
les ports
had
du
a
marché
lot
voisines.
of interconnection
Je
points
vais
with the
illustrer
neighboring
ça par quelques
marketplaces. So
graphes
I'm going to show
qui montrent
that
comment
with a
la TRF
few
a permis de bien
graphs. And these
approvisionner les
show
grands
how the
pays du
TRF
sud
made
de
it possible
l'Europe.
to properly supply the
Donc le
southern
premier
countries
graphe
of
montre
Europe.
les exports de gaz depuis
This
la
first
France vers
graph
l'Espagne
shows
via
the
la
gas
partie
exports from
Pyrénéos.
France to
Donc on
Spain
voit que
by the
ces exports ont
Pyrenees
été
outlet.
particulièrement élevés
You can see that these
lorsqu'il y a eu
exports
moins
were very
de
high,
GNL
especially
en
when there
Europe et
was
en Espagne.
less
L'Espagne avait dès
LNG
lors
in
besoin
Europe and in
d'un
Spain.
approvisionnement alternatif
Spain
et
therefore
donc
needed
la France et
alternative
la TRF
supply,
a su
which meant that France and
exporter du gaz
TRF was
pour couvrir
able
les besoins
to
espagnols, donc
export
notamment
gas to
au
cover
milieu de
the
l'été
needs in
et au
Spain,
début de l'hiver.
especially in the middle of the summer and at the start of
Si on
the
regarde
winter.
l'Italie maintenant, les exports vers
If we
l'Italie
look
ont
at
été
Italy,
très élevés sur la
exports to
première moitié
Italy
de l'année
were very
à peu
high,
près,
especially the first part
avant
of the year,
de décliner
before they went
jusqu'à avoir même
down
des entrées de gaz depuis l'Italie vers la France
and
en janvier de cette année.
input
Alors des
from
flux
Italy to
physiques
France
de
in
la
January
Suisse
this year as well. So
vers la
physical
France,
flows
je crois que
from
c'est la première fois que ça s'est
Switzerland
produit, non?
to
Oui, tout
France.
à
I think
fait. C'est
that's
la
the
première
first
fois que ça
time
s'est
that's ever
produit.
happened.
Alors ça a été
Yes,
possible grâce
that's the first time
d'une
that's
part à la
happened.
mise en
And this
service
happened
de l'entrée
because
Holting
of the
en
commissioning
2018
of the Oltang
qui avait été
input
faite en
flow
prévision
in
de l'arrivée du TAP, donc
2018.
du
And
Transadriatic
this was to
Pipeline,
plan for the
qui amène du gaz en
Trans-Adriatic
Italie. Donc
pipeline,
c'est finalement une
which
nouvelle
was
source
taking gas to
d'approvisionnement
Italy.
pour l'Europe.
This is
Et
a new
suivant les conditions
source
de
of
marché, ça
supply
peut être
for
intéressant de
Europe,
faire
and
revenir,
depending on the market
remonter ce
situation, it
gaz
might be
jusqu'en
interesting to
France
send this gas back to
depuis l'Italie.
France
Donc c'est un changement dans les flux
from Italy.
européens.
And this is a change in the
Merci
flows in
Ruben. Et
Europe.
quel est le bilan en termes
Thank you.
de congestion? En 2019, pour la première
What
année
does
de la
this mean for
TRF, il y a eu beaucoup de
congestion
congestion, occasionnant des
in
coûts assez élevés de spread
the
localisé. Est-ce que ça a été le cas
2019?
aussi
There
pour
was quite a
2020?
lot of cost
Alors il
for
y a eu beaucoup
localized spread,
moins
for
de
example, because this
congestion
was this case
en
in 2020.
2020
There was a
comparé
lot
à
less
2019.
congestion in
Nous
2020
avons eu
compared to
seulement 18 jours
2019.
en alerte rouge,
Just
des
18
jours avec des
days in
congestions,
red alert,
contre
days
56
with
jours en
congestion,
2019.
compared to
Il n'y a eu
58
aucune
days in
restriction mutualisée,
2019. So
alors
there
qu'il
were
y en avait
no
deux
mutualized
en
restrictions,
2019.
but there had been two
La
in
conséquence est
2019,
aussi qu'il y a eu beaucoup moins
which
d'appels de
means
spread localisé,
that
seulement 15 en
there was a
2020,
lot
alors
less
qu'il y en avait eu
call for
44
locational
en
spread, only
2019.
15 in
Si on
2020, whereas
s'interroge
there were
sur les coûts,
44 in
maintenant, les
2019.
coûts
If we look at
de
the
gestion des
cost
congestions et de spread
as
localisés
well,
ont été aussi bien moindres.
costs for congestion and
D'une part,
locational
il y a eu
spread were
moins
much
d'appels, mais
lower
aussi
as
ces
well.
appels ont été
There
moins
were less
coûteux et
calls,
qu'un prix moyen
but the
de
calls were
spread localisé
also cost
est passé de
less
4 euros
as
par
well.
mégawattheure en 2019 à
Went from
1,3
€4 per
en
megawatt
2020.
hour to 1.3
Au final,
euros
le
per
coût de
megawatt hour in
congestion a
2020,
beaucoup
which
diminué,
means
passant
that
de 7,2 millions
the
d'euros en
amount of congestion
2019
has
à
gone down
850 000 euros en
7.2
2020.
million euros in 2019 to
Et pourquoi est-ce que
0.85
les
million
réseaux
euros in
étaient moins
2020.
tendus? Est-ce que c'était lié au
Why
Covid?
was the network
Alors,
less
ça a été pas lié
strained?
au
Was this
Covid.
because of network
Au
or
contraire,
COVID?
le
It wasn't
Covid
linked to
a
COVID
plutôt eu
necessarily, but
tendance à tendre le réseau,
COVID actually
notamment en
had made
avril-mai,
the
comme il y avait cet
network
excès de
more
gaz
congested in April, May,
lié
for
à la baisse
example,
des
because there was
consommations
an
à cause du
excess of
Covid. Il a
gas
fallu
with the
injecter ce gaz
decreased consumption
fortement
because of
dans
COVID.
les
We had to
stockages et notamment dans
inject
les stockages
gas into
importants du sud
storage,
de la France.
especially in
Donc
the
cela a créé des
significant
flux
storage
nord-sud importants et
capacity
donc
in
une
the south of
tension sur le
France,
réseau.
which had a lot of north-south
Malgré
flow,
cette
so a
tension,
more
il n'y a pas eu de
strained
congestion
network. But
grâce à
despite
un
this tense
pilotage
network, there was no
optimisé de la
congestion thanks
TRF qui a pu être fait grâce aux
to
REX
optimized
de
use
la
of the
première année de
TRF,
la TRF.
thanks to
Nous
the
avons aussi
REC from the
bénéficié de
first year
certains
of the
facteurs
TRF. And
favorables
we also
comme
had some
des sorties
advantageous factors as
modérées
well,
de
such
gaz vers
as
l'Espagne en cette
moderate
période
gas
avril-mai.
outputs to
Et
Spain in
aussi, nous
April,
avons
May.
bénéficié de la réduction de la
And we
capacité
also
d'injection
had
dans les
the
stockages du
reduction
Sud
in the
par
injection
rapport à
capacity
l'année
in
précédente.
south storage
En
compared
revanche,
to the previous
en
year.
août, c'est là que nous
However,
avons eu
in
des congestions et des
August,
appels au spread
we had
localisé,
some congestion
car
with
il y avait
calls for
aussi à ce moment-là
locational
de fortes
spread because
injections dans les stockages,
there
mais par contre
was
peu
a lot more
de
injection
GNL,
into the
notamment
storage
dans le sud
points
de la
and not
France.
very much
Et comme il y avait
LNG,
peu de
especially in the
GNL
south of
également en
France.
Espagne, il y avait de
Because there
fortes
wasn't very much
sorties à
LNG in Spain
Pyrénéos pour
either, there was a
approvisionner
lot
l'Espagne.
of
Donc
exports
ça,
in Pyrenees to supply
ça a été
Spain.
des facteurs
défavorable
These were unfavorable factors for congestion, which meant that we had to launch locational spreads, but the price was more reasonable, and we also improved the trading strategy for locational spread offers compared to 2019, and we also observed better competition to respond to locational. More people responded to the calls, which meant that the locational spread prices were better balanced.
Merci pour ce bilan, Ruben.
Thank you for
Est-ce que tu pourrais
this
nous dire quelles sont tes
summary,
prévisions pour cet été?
Ruben.
Est-ce que
Could
tu aurais
you
une boule
maybe
de
tell us
cristal?
what your
Non, moi,
forecasts
je n'ai
are?
pas de
Do
boule
you
de
have a
cristal.
crystal
Je
ball
vais
for
pas
this summer?
pouvoir
I don't have a crystal ball,
vous dire
unfortunately. I'm
quels
not
seront
going to be
les
able
effets de la
to
TRF
tell you
cet été.
what the TRF flows will look
Je ne vais
like
pas
in this
pouvoir
summer.
vous dire si vous
I'm
pourrez
not going to
partir
be
en
able
vacances sous les
to
cocotiers.
tell you whether
Par
you
contre,
can
je peux vous
go
parler
on
du programme
holiday
de maintenance
and see some
de
palm
l'été
trees, but I can
2021
talk to you
qui a
about the
été
maintenance schedule for summer
publié début mars et
2021. And
que
this was
nous avons
published at the
présenté
start of
lors d'un webinaire
March, and
le 4
we
mars. Donc,
presented
je
this
ne vais
on a
pas vous
webinar on
représenter
the
en
4th of
détail ce
March.
programme de
I'm not going
maintenance.
to
Vous pouvez
go
retrouver
through this
le
in
webinaire si vous
detail.
voulez un
You can
complément.
go and have a look at the
Par
webinar
contre,
if you want any
j'attire votre
additional
attention sur le fait
information.
que cet été,
But I
il y
did
aura
want to
4
draw your
superpoints
attention to the fact that
actifs sur
this
la
summer there will be
TRF,
4
3
super
du côté
points
de
active
GRT
on
Gaz
the
et 1
TRF,
du côté
3 for
de TRE
GRT
Gaz.
gas and 1
Et une nouveauté par
for
rapport aux années
TEREGA.
précédentes, c'est que le
And a
superpoint
new point
N2U
compared to
sera
previous years is
activé.
that
C'est
the
un
super point
superpoint qui est activé pour la
N2U
première
will be
fois, qui
activated.
concerne
This has
les
been
points
activated
d'entrée
for the first
Virtualis,
time.
Dunkerque
This is for
et
the
Dunkerque GNL. Donc, si
Dunkirk,
vous avez de la capacité sur ces
Virtualis,
points-là,
and Dunkirk
veillez bien
LNG
à
input points. If
regarder
you have
les
capacity
restrictions
on those
liées
points,
à
make sure that
l'activation
you check
de ce
any
superpoint.
restrictions linked to the
Est-ce qu'on
activation
pourra
of
remplir
this
les
new
stockages?
super point.
Oui,
Can we fill
tout
up
à fait. Nous
storage?
avons fait des
Yes, you can.
simulations, notamment
We
avec
have
Storengy,
run some
pour
simulations as well
estimer
with
la capacité
Storengy, for example,
des
to
stockages à
estimate
être remplis
the
au cours de l'été malgré les
storage
restrictions liées aux
capacity that
travaux.
can be filled
Et
through the
nous
summer
n'avons pas
despite
d'alerte
restrictions linked
particulière.
to the
Nous avons
works, and there were no
particulièrement regardé le
specific
stockage atlantique, qui est
red
le plus
flags about
contraint
this. We looked at
par
the
les
Atlantic
restrictions.
storage,
Et même
which
dans
is
un
the most
scénario
restricted
de
because of the
maintenance
restrictions.
défavorable, le stockage pourrait être
And even in
rempli
an
à
unfavorable
la fin de l'été.
situation,
Dans un
storage
scénario
will be filled at the end of
raisonnable
the summer.
de restrictions, il pourrait
And
être
with a more
rempli
reasonable
au cours
restriction
de la
scenario,
première
it
moitié
could be
du mois
filled
d'octobre.
through the
Donc ça, c'était une
first
bonne nouvelle
half
qu'on
of
puisse remplir les
October.
stockages.
So
Et en
that's
termes
good news,
d'indicateurs
at
de
least that we can fill
disponibilité
up
des
the
capacités,
storage.
est-ce
In
qu'on est
terms of
meilleur que l'an dernier?
availability indicators
Alors
for these
justement,
capacities, are we doing any better
quelques
than last
chiffres à
year?
vous montrer
Well, I
qui
actually have
montrent
some
le
figures to
taux de
show you about that.
disponibilité moyen des
This shows
capacités
the
souscrites sur
average
l'année
availability rate
2021.
for capacities that were
Alors pour ceux
subscribed
qui
to
ont
for
assisté au précédent Shippers Meeting,
2021.
ce sont
For
des
those of you
chiffres qui
who
sont
were at the
un peu
last
différents
Shippers
par rapport à
meeting,
ceux que
these
nous
figures may be
montrions les années
slightly different
précédentes,
compared to the ones
car ce
that
sont
we
de
have shown
nouveaux
you in
indicateurs,
previous years,
notamment qui
because these
correspondent
are
aux indicateurs
new
qualité de service
indicators that
que nous
correspond
publions pour la
to the
première
service
fois
quality
cette
indicators
année.
that we are publishing for the
Donc
first
si on
time
regarde les
this year.
chiffres en eux-mêmes,
If we
la
look at
conclusion
the
c'est que
figures
le programme de
themselves,
travaux
what we can
consolidé
say
publié
is
en
that
mars
the
est uniquement
consolidated
une
work schedule that
amélioration
we published
par
in
rapport
March
au
is
programme travaux
better
provisoires publié au
compared
mois
to the
d'octobre 2020.
provisional
On voit que dans le
work schedule
scénario de
published in
disponibilité
October
probable,
2020. If we look at the
la
availability
disponibilité moyenne
scenario,
est
the
améliorée
probable
passant de
availability, it's
96,7
better
à 97,4%. De
from
même pour le scénario
96.7 to
de disponibilité
97.4%. The
minimale
same
qui
goes for the
s'améliore
minimum
d'environ
availability as
1%.
well, which has gone up by about
Si on se
1%.
compare aux années précédentes, on voit que le
If
niveau
we
de
try to compare
disponibilité
this to
probable
previous
est en
years, you
ligne
can see that the
avec les années
availability
2019 et
rate
2020,
is
autour
in
de
line with 2020 and
97,5% de
2019, about
disponibilité. On peut aussi noter
97.5%
que
of
cet
availability.
indicateur de disponibilité prévu
This
comme probable et fiable, par les
probable
années précédentes, la
availability rate is
disponibilité
reliable
réelle
because
a
in
été
previous years,
proche
the real
de la
availability
disponibilité
was very
probable
close to
annoncée
the
au mois de mars.
probable availability that we
Et
announced in
est-ce
March.
qu'on a des éléments à dire sur les
Do
perspectives
we
pour les
have
années à venir
anything
en
to
termes de
say
travaux?
about
Alors, oui,
forecasts for
nous
coming
avons
years in terms of
des
the
éléments à
work
vous apporter
schedules? Yes, we do have
liés
some
au fait
information to give you
que
about that.
un décret a été
This is
publié
linked
en
to the fact
2020 qui
that
renforce
a
l'arrêté
decree was
multifluide,
published in
qui est
2020
un
which
arrêté qui
strengthens
encadre la manière dont
the
nous devons
multi-fluids
inspecter et
decree, and
maintenir
this
nos
frames
installations.
the way in which we
Ce décret
inspect and
renforce
maintain
la
our
fréquence des
facilities. This
inspections que nous devons
strengthens
réaliser.
the
Nous
frequency of
devons inspecter nos
inspection checks that
canalisations
need to
tous
be
les 10
carried
ans,
out. We
alors
have
que
to
jusqu'à
check
présent
our
c'était tous les
pipelines every 10
15
years. whereas before it was every 15 to 20 years. A change in regulation has nothing to do with us. The current regulation in force before was enough, but different factors pushed the authorities to strengthen regulations in terms of the maintenance. This is namely linked to an accident on an oil pipeline, but in terms of gas, we don't have any specific requests to increase inspections. The consequence of this is that the number of inspections and repairs should be multiplied by around 1.7, which is quite a lot, and this will be a challenge for us. So that's bad news because it means that we're doubling the amount of work that has to be done, and it's a shame because DRT Gas had done a lot to improve in terms of works. The unavailability rate had been halved between 2016 and 2020. Does this mean that our indicators are going to be deteriorating? Well, it's not good news, but our goal is to maintain the same level of availability as previous years. Given the new constraints that we are going to have, it will mean deploying a lot of effort. It will be a challenge, especially having done a lot to halve this between 2016 and 2020. But we have this ambitious goal to give you the same amount of availability, the capacities, despite the increase in the number of repairs and work. So I think I'm reaching the end of my presentation. To conclude, what we can say is that the TRF is at the crossroads of the European market, thanks to its ability to attract a lot of LNG to supply the neighboring countries, and it has a liquid peg correlated to the other marketplaces, and to remember as well a challenge that we have before us to always provide you with the same amount of capacity availability despite any of the new constraints that I've spoken about.
Thank you very much, Ruben. And now I will have at my screen to see if we have questions. And feel free to ask your questions. We have 5 minutes to answer your questions before the break and the next presentation. So why do you have 2 scenarios of availability for works, NCI, and repairs? That's a very good question. Well, the real availability on one day, it depends on different factors. For example, the flux, and this is why now there's a certain uncertainty in our capacity doing somehow, because we cannot, unfortunately, forecast all the amount of LNG. So this is why we just have to give you a bracket, an estimate, CNMTT, the minimum availability, and we have a probable scenario based on what LNG we could observe during the past few years, and we try to give you an estimate, so to have an idea of the ability. Thank you very much, Ruben. We don't have any other questions, so we could still have some time to ask questions. So we don't have any other questions, so we can move on. And Barbara, you'll talk about the new have your presentation start the sold. Okay, so once again, good morning. So now I will talk about gas transportation and upstream gas transportation by DRT gas. I can't see my slides. Thank you very much. So let's go back to 2020, and now we'll talk about the outlook for 2020. And so what happened in 2020? That we try to improve our offer. So we have a short video. The new all our peers are on Prisma. And now Dunkirk is now on Prisma too. This went smoothly, as we also improved the TRF just after the feedback we received after the first year. And we have this offer at Fos and Montoire, and it allows us to give an enhanced visibility on what we're doing and give us more firm capacity, because the LNG arriving upstream, we can actually send it directly to our clients, which is a great improvement. So we also have an improvement of the localational spread. Another improvement after discussions with the CRE that we have the joint maintenance schedule. We can help us to see clearly all the potential restrictions for gas shippers in France. And finally, for the TRT7, we have several potential improvements, and we welcome this to increase the flexibility for LNG. So, concluded the improvements of 2020. So what about the outlook? Well, we don't have much changes for 2021, but nonetheless, we are working on different topics that should be developed in the future. But we wanted to share these topics with you. But first and foremost, we have the increase of short-term sales, because as you know, we have a lot of long-term subscriptions. But this number of subscriptions are decreasing. We have more and more short-term subscriptions. So what we want is to be more and more efficient on the short term. So this is why we started to work on two things. First and foremost is try to be more flexible with the CAM. So what does it mean when we have these the monthly auctions? And this is idea is to have only have a one-day auction during one day on the previous month. And if the spread is not favorable, we will monthly capacity should be assessed pretty much every day, so we can actually optimize a way for the offer to meet the demand. So we have a consultation in Europe at the beginning of 2021, and now we're just analyzing the results of this consultation. The second topic is the change among multiplayers, and we have to start thinking of it the same as the daily rates. So we have to review these prices and rates. Now let's move on to the next slide. And in 2021, we'll have to tackle some challenges. For example, the studies with LNG. So we'll like to adopt this single-sided nomination. So we only have to select someone in LNG, not we have this. And we'll also need to adopt the offer to a small-scale LNG, for example, with vehicular natural gas. So we discussed things during this ATTM6 discussions, and we'll have to talk about this in 2021. And finally, as you probably saw in the newspapers, that LNG was about to launch what we call an open season at Fos Cavao. So as an operator, well, DRT Gas will have to do the possibilities to adapt this new situation, to adapt its capacities. So And then we also have all the topics, like, for example, on the TRF. Even though we think that we just reach kind of an optimal functioning of this, we still have things we could improve. For example, with Terega, we've been working. We're trying to have a better injection on the Atlantic side. So we'll have discussions in April, and the CRE would like to have a general discussion about this, about TRF, after these past few years. And finally, the last topic is the importance and the priority given to biomethane. As we'll say in the next presentation, we have 2 terawatts per hour injected in 2020, and the objective is to reach 12 terawatts per hour in 2024, 40 terawatts per hour in 2030. We worked hard with thoroughly with different stakeholders, and what we want is to work on guard transportation, is allocation and balancing to make things much easier for you, shippers and clients. So we're not going to review the rates and the prices, because from the 1st of April 2021, the injection term will be paid by the producer. So I've finished my presentation. So feel free to tell us if you want to work on these topics. We're really interested in knowing what you have to say to build our offers. Yes, we have questions. Yes, the first question is more about the previous presentation. Maybe you could answer this question. If we have more works, we have more. And we have more operations on the locational spread. So if we have more works, do you mean to have a more locational spread? Is that true? Well, not necessarily, because what we want is to keep our availability indicators at the same level. So it means approximately 97% of availability. Nonetheless, if it's not possible, if we cannot achieve this, it means that we have a longer period of works. But normally, we wouldn't require any locational spread for this. It's part of all the works. And second question, what is the open season at Fos Cavao? Well, the open season, you probably read this in the newspapers, but LNG is about to start an open season and to increase its capacities at Fos Cavao. So it means we have 2 phases. The first one will probably take place during the first half of 2021, and we have a more committing period during the second semester of 2021. The idea is to increase the amount of LNG leaving Fos Cavao. So we're working on this, and we try to assess the impact of this increase on our own capacities. We try to see if we can adapt our network, but we try to make it as compatible as possible with the energy transition. So we're thinking to have a reasonable investments and to stay flexible. It means to have more LNG, but to invest less. So this we have to keep this in the review in 2021. Another question: the energy markets are becoming more and more volatile, and do you think this increasing daily rates would go against this flexibility? So we didn't say we would increase the daily rates, but we just said we have to find the correlation, study the correlation between the daily rates and the monthly rates. So just the idea is we to cap these multiplayer factor at 1.5. But of course, we know that it may be a possibility that we have to increase the daily rates, but it could generate more income for the shipper, but it will create less opportunities because it's less possible that the spread will be higher than the capacity. So there are good arguments in favor and against this. So we still don't know how we're going to proceed. So of course you'll be associated and you can participate in these discussions on this point. And we have another question. Yes. What about the projects to compensate the CO2 emissions by the Arctic gas? So can you repeat the question? If there's a project that may give the possibility to compensate the CO2 emissions by the Arctic gas. So you mean offer carbon neutral projects? So the Arctic gas, we have indeed we have a project. In what we call the CO2 trajectory. We have indicators and we have goals. And the idea is by 2024 to decrease by 20% the CO2 emissions, and more specifically about compression, because we have compressors, electric compressors. And the idea would be to, if it's possible, to buy biomethane to have a greener energy. So this is what we want to do. But now, do you want to have this more concrete element in our offer? So, but if we're not working on this yet, but if you think it's something relevant for you, if you want to see this in our offers, well, we'll be happy to discuss this point with you. And we have another question. We have new regulations, and do you think they may have an impact on the development of the Arctic gas and on your projects? Well, yes, it's a very important topic, and I'll give the floor to Mathilde, because she's specialist of the biomethane, and she can give you a very thorough answer on this. So I think we don't have any other questions. Let's wait a few seconds. We have another question, yes. Could you explain once again what it means what are the offers in Force and Montoire? The upstream offer at Force and Montoire. During the first year of TRF, we published a paper on the limits of what we had, but unfortunately, these terminals in Force and Montoire are between two limits, and when we didn't have much LNG, it worked well, but when we have too much LNG, we have to find to switch to all the terminals, and it was getting a bit complicated. So the whole idea is that we try to work upstream, and since the part of the LNG is going downstream, for example, if you say 100 gigawatts per hour, we'll send a CTE on the previous day, so it actually helps us to cope with the huge volumes of LNG. So the LNG is also included in the capacity, so we have a better visibility on what we do and how we can manage all these volumes of gas. So now let's welcome Arnaud Chevillon, who will talk about compensation and storage. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Arnaud Chevillon from the marketing department, and I will click on my slides, I'll talk about storage compensation and interruptibility. And just give me a few seconds to have my slides. Right, here we are. We have our slides. So, in the first place, I will talk about the storage compensation with the new formula and the extension to transport as of April, the 1st of April in 2020, means in 2 weeks from now. And we'll talk about the new interruptibility because we have a new formula, mathematical formula for this. So this new formula is on the slide as of the 1st of April 2021. So this was published by the Committee for Energy Regulations. So it will calculate on to what we call output for the clients. We have different steps. First of all, we need to calculate the modulation on a year called Y, which is between 0 and the average winter consumption and minus the yearly consumption. So you see the average winter consumption from between the 1st of November to the 1st of March divided by 151, and the yearly consumption is between the 1st of November to the 31st of October divided by 365. So based on this, we can have the consumption for 1 year. So in 2021, we analyzed the consumption between 2017, 28, 28, 29, 21, 29, 20. And so then we move on to the second step, and we calculate what is called the MFAV, the average of the lowest two modulations for 1 year. And this is what we've been doing since December, sorry. So we just needed some time to collect all the relevant information, and we sent to our clients. And once we've found the MFAV, we have reached the final stage of this, and we call the modulation for one site will be between 0 and M5 minus int, and int is defined as a sum of interruptibility booked by the shipper and secondary interruptibility booked directly by the consumer. And these values are taken into consideration on the 1st of April. And you see the links, the correlation with the secondary interruptibility that we'll be talking more extensively later on. So we also calculated what's something called the winter share. This is something that doesn't really exist for us, but it exists for distribution and people in charge of the distribution networks. And we know that when we talk about distribution, all the users and clients have a profile, and these. So I won't tell you, give you all the details on how to find this winter share, but you can get on the website and we have all the relevant information. So we've been asked to calculate and assess the winter share for all our sites. So if the winter share is at 50%, well, the modulation is at 0, and if it's between 50% and 100%, so we try to keep this winter share. And final step to assess the storage compensation on one site, on one point. So we take the modulation and the winter storage and multiply it by a factor. So it was developed by the regulation. It was declared to be at 185.11 euros. So of course we have to bill these amounts to the shippers. Well, it's great, but it's important to have to communicate and to give all these figures to everyone. So we have the M5. And so we published everything at the beginning of February because we have the final the definitive formula in February, and now we're expecting the feedback from our clients, and they want to know if they want to sign an interruptibility contract. And when we know this and we have all this feedback, so of course we will send all these modulations of our clients that are in our portfolios. So last week we sent to 12 shippers these templates that we're using for the people, those of you who have clients in distribution networks. It's the same template that we'll have and we'll keep on using. And we have the same templates for all the delivery points. So you'll receive a template, and when we finally receive the modulation values, well, you'll have everything. So this is how I'm done with calculations. Now let's talk about this new interruptibility. One of the many kinds of new interruptibility. So we have the key elements. So we have a decree published on the 17th of December on interruptibility. So we worked, I mean, Terragas and Giardigas, we worked together on this decree to propose new ideas and new projects. So when we have these new ideas, we got in touch with the industrial clients, and we try to define projects for potential contracts, because we couldn't figure everything out. So we had to have drafts and projects. And during the summer of 2020, we published these projects. We also published the agreement procedure, and then we try to get in touch with our clients and to explain to our clients, this is what the contracts will look like. Do you agree with this? Would you sign this? And to sum things up, we have one client, and the interruptibility contract will be signed directly between Giardigas and a client. And if we would Tariga, we would between Tariga and the client. So at one point during the life of the contract, if the amounts would go below the secondary interruptibility of the contract, well, we'll end the contract, we'll terminate the contract. Then, what does it mean, this secondary interruptibility? Well, we have maybe at least 40 megawatts per hour per day on each consumption point, and these consumption points are clearly defined in the decree. So if we had to interrupt this, well, we need to know that we have only no more than 2 interruptions per year. It cannot be longer than 24 hours. It cannot be more than 240 hours per year. So 40 megawatts per hour per day, with 2 interruptions per year for a minimum of 24 hours and no longer than 240 hours per year. So if we have a client that doesn't comply with these rules, then for each day, well, we have a penalty, and the penalty are defined in the decree, and we have a penalty of 200 euros. Maybe it was a bit too fast for you. Maybe you probably have questions, and Barbara is still with me. Yes, oh no, we have a few questions. We have an poll, so just remember they can poll and can vote for the questions. So could we have an example for the cost? I think they're talking about the cost of storage compensation. So let's say you have a compensation of 100 megawatts per hour, so it's a modulation. So we have intermediary modulation, we remove the interruptibilities. So let's multiply by the 185.11 euros, and we'll multiply it, so then we'll bill it to the clients, and we'll pay 1/12 of this amount every month. So we have other questions as they arrive, and based on the votes, the calculation on the previous slide doesn't allow us to calculate the part d'hiver, the winter share. So let me use my remote control to get back to this. So we have the formula to calculate modulation. So if you want to have all these details on how to calculate this part d'hiver, this winter share, I invite you to go on a website and watch the webinar, and you'll see me because I was there in February, and you have all the calculations, all the details, all the necessary indications to calculate this part d'hiver. So we have the gross consumption in winter. Then we have factors, and we have the rates, and that are evolving pretty much every year. So we have three intermediary winter shares, and we have to make an average, calculate the average of the three intermediary winter shares. So go on our website, have a look at this webinar, see our presentation, and we'll have everything. And then, based on this, we can multiply the modulation that you can see on the slide by 1 or by 0. And another question: the final users that sometimes with a low income may be heavily impacted by the increase of these prices. Yes, it's a possibility. This is why we've been working in 2019 with the Commission for Energy Regulations. If you have a look at the first calculations on modulation, it means we have a modulation of approximately 200 gigawatts per hour every day for our clients. So if we multiply it by 185 euros and 11 cents, we have probably a cost of 35 million euros for our clients. So we worked on this, and when I mean so it means the impact for our clients is 35 million euros, and we don't include interruptibility in this, so we did what we could. But at the end of the day, the decision to extend this storage compensation, well, it is a responsibility of the CRE. So thank you very much for your answer, Arnaud. Then we have another question: how many sites have already signed an interruptibility contract? And the answer is none. So we noticed an acceleration between today and yesterday. We saw like a request for a contract, and so goes between 10 megawatts per hour to more than gigawatts per hour. So if you're a client, you probably received an email that was sent on Monday, because things are moving fast, because the 31st of March is literally tomorrow. So we accept all your requests by the 31st of March. So we're working on the contracts. We'll send these contracts. Probably not. We cannot guarantee that all the contracts will be sent on the 31st of March, but But we'll send you the contracts, and you need to sign these contracts, and they'll be valid on the 1st of April. And we'll take all the requests, the complete requests.
When will you be able to send the modulation values to shippers? As soon as we have the contracts signed. We've given the clients to the 15th of April to sign that. After that, we will have all of the elements we need. We'll have the valid modulation values, the interruptibility subscribed to as well, subscribed to by the consumer, and a secondary interruptibility contract. And in the second half of April, we can send all shippers. And I think if you look, I think Article 6 or 7 in the decree, the modulation we need to have modulation for each of your customers, but also the modulation as well as the secondary interruptibility values subscribed to by your customers at the end of the contract, because if in the future we had to interrupt it, then you would be affected. So all of the elements you need, we will send them to you in the second half of April, given that the billing for storage will only be received in May. So as soon as we have the information, it will be sent to you. I know that some have already asked for it. We don't have the modulation values right now. Thank you, Arnaud. There are no more questions. We're now going to move on, and Aurore will be talking to us about the Rio program. Good morning, everybody. I am Aurore Blot. Today I'm going to talk about the Rio program, specifically the client portal. Don't hesitate to send me your questions on the platform, and I will have some time at the end to answer those. To start, let's have a quick look at our future portal. Ingrid, this is the name of your future customer portal. It's also the visible part of the Rio program. The Rio program is the transformation project of the offer for GRT gas. Transaction is an aging tool that we struggle to scale, and therefore we have technical obsolescence. The Rio program isn't just about solving this technical obsolescence, but GRT Gas wants to use this to improve different processes as well. Firstly, with Rio and Ingrid specifically, we will be able to guarantee better quality of services that we offer. Furthermore, it's also a chance to strengthen our interactions and to make them easier, to put them back at the center of the process. And Rio is also a chance to make data a lever for better performance. In this environment, Ingrid will be the visible part of this. The submerged part is the portal that we will be able to talk about together. Rio is a large-scale problem. To implement this, GRT Gas has gone with an agile process for different reasons. The main reason is because we want to be able to see the achievements as they come in, not just at the end of the project. Two of the achievements are available right now. The illustration that you have on the left-hand side, this is a portal to declare the consumption profiles for highly modulated sites, the LSFM. Until a few months ago, you sent us these profiles and statements through the transactions portal. Now you have a new interface which allows you to send us these profiles, and you can also receive our reply on this portal as well. The second achievement available since the end of last year, this is the sellable, marketable capacity. Except for Dunkirk, which is a specific point. The idea of this is to be able to have a visual outlook of the available capacity, the capacity that we can sell on the Prisma platform. This is what you see on the right-hand side of the slide. As you can see, the browsing experience is fundamentally different compared to transaction, and it will need some change as well. The change has already started. The interfaces that you see here, the pages you see, have been co-built, co-designed with you. And the idea of Ingrid is to co-design all of the pages with you. Now, how do we do this? Well, mainly, we have workshops. We have change management workshops, and we've had some for GRT Gas already. But we also have collaboration workshops as well. I just want to take a quick minute to give you more detail on what happens during these collaboration workshops. The main idea is that for GRT Gas, we're using an existing pathway. For example, the pathway to subscribe to capacities on the downstream network. We take into account all of the annoyances that you may have sent to us on transactions and the advantages, the good points as well, if there are some of those as well. So then we can suggest a new pathway. And when I say we suggest a new pathway, what I mean is that we are suggesting a prototype. You can click on this prototype that can fully immerse you into what the future pages of Ingrid will look like. And then during the workshop, we can look at different scenarios and we look at your reactions to these different scenarios. What's very interesting here for us is that we can take your feelings immediately, what you think is intuitive, what isn't intuitive, and then at the end of this workshop, we come to some kind of agreement on what the final prototype will be and what will be your portal when it will be put in place. We know that not everybody is able to take part in these workshops if you don't have time, for example. And so before each implementation, we can support these different achievements with webinars and tutorials to help you get used to them. Finally, your account manager at GRT Gas will be able to support you as well. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to speak to them, ask them your questions, and they will be able to support you. If we talk about Rio now, Ingrid is the name of the future portal, which has already been partly put in place. But now let's look at the coming stages. The next step is very soon. The date is the 8th of April. On the 8th of April, we will be implementing the Ingrid Lab portal. This is for consumer clients. Ingrid Lab will have access to measurements, quality gas factors, and invoicing. That's the first pillar of the portal. The second step is mid-April. We will be holding a workshop, and I want to use this opportunity today to call on any volunteers who would like to take part in this workshop. It's very important to take part in this. The topic will be the capacities and services portfolio. As part of this workshop, we are going to review the publication together, look at the data that are obsolete, the data that are necessary, so that we make sure that it is truly fitting to your needs. Furthermore, if we talk about the content of the publication during this workshop, we are also looking at how you can recover this publication. Whether daily or every now and again you use the portfolio, I very much recommend that you talk to your GRT Gas account manager so that you can sign up to the workshop. The more people sign up, the more representative the panel will be, so a more exhaustive review of this publication. It's very important for us so that we can offer to you the publication that fits your uses. But if you aren't available for the workshop, don't hesitate to send any of your negative or positive points to your account manager, and they will be your spokesperson. The third step is in May 2021. This is for 3 separate actions, for transactions. It's going to change the email authentication process to harmonize with the Ingrid Lab email. To log on to transaction, now you use a password and a login details, but in the future, from May, you'll be able to use one email address, and then you can just change your password when you want to. For the midterm projects, the start of next year, for example, which is quite close, at the start of next year, you won't be using transaction anymore for capacity services, but you will be using Ingrid instead. And this is a huge milestone because it means that for any capacity subscription request, renewal request, service subscription request, you won't use transaction anymore, but you will just be using Ingrid. And lastly, in the longer term, this is the date that you saw in the previous video as well. 2024, Ingrid will replace transaction. I want to draw your attention to the fact that between the start of next year and 2024, you will have 2 separate customer portals, Ingrid for services and capacity, transaction for operations and measurements. Of course, over time, the transaction scope will be reduced and Ingrid will increase. By 2024, you will hear from us before then, of course, and we will keep you apprised of the different steps taken. Thank you for listening, and now let's move on to the questions, if we have any. Yes, we have received one question as well, so I want to remind you that you can ask your questions on the chat. We are here to answer them. We have a question with one vote. Why are you starting with the consumer portal? Okay, that's a good question. The consumer portal is the one with the most negative points, annoyances, and that's why we started with this one. The second reason is the scope of the consumer portal is smaller than the shipper portal. And so putting Ingrid Labs in place first means that we can get your feedback about it and hear your feedback on Ingrid Labs so that we can then take that into account for the shippers portal.
Alors, il n'y a pas de nouvelles questions.
There are no further questions. Don't hesitate if you want to ask any. We do have 1 minute left. But I can ask you a question in the meantime. Why Ingrid? Why did you call it that? Well, the idea behind Ingrid, the goal that we have with this new portal really is to put you at the heart of the network. Is in grid. We are together at the heart of the GRT Gas network. Therefore, we want to shine the light on this emphasis of our interaction. So we wanted to make it more of a personal portal. And in the meantime, we actually received another question. This will be the last one, I think. Could you talk to us about the different portals between 2022 and 2024? Okay, so between that time, at the start of 2022, Ingrid will just be for subscriptions and services, which means subscriptions to upstream network will be via Prisma, of course, but subscriptions for downstream network and services subscriptions will be on Ingrid in terms of operations. And when I say operations, I mean nominations, scheduling, assignments, measurements, that will still be on transactions while we wait for it to be completely decommissioned in 2024. We've gone just past the schedule, but just one last question. How do we know what portal to use to look at what kind of information? Well, let's not panic about that. At the start of 2022, we will be supporting and anticipating change in portal, and we will be ensuring exchanges and making it easy to browse between the two. So if you forget that downstream subscription requests are on Ingrid, if you go to transaction, you will be sent to the right portal via transaction in case you get it wrong. One last question. I know that we're eating into our break.
Are you planning to offer English support?
Of course. Oui, bien sûr, le portail Ingrid sera à la fois
Yes, the Ingrid portal will be in French and in English, of course. Okay, so let's stop there for questions. Thank you for sending those in, and thank you for being so interactive. It's now time for a break, so let's meet here at 11 o'clock after the break.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today with you for the second part of this morning session, and we wanted to talk about, more specifically, about carbon neutrality. So, GRTGAS is still fully committed to ensure the good functioning of the French gas network and to guarantee a full access to this attractive and competitive marketplace. At the same time, we're also fully aware that it's necessary to transform our market to tackle the challenges of climate change, and through decarbonization and greener energy. We are fully convinced that it's thanks to this diversified energy mix, and which includes the renewable gases, that we can reach these objectives. We are also fully convinced that our infrastructure, our company, can have a major role to play in accompanying and supporting these evolutions. And this is why GRTGAS is fully committed in the development of production and use of renewable gases in partnership with the clients and the territories. And this is why we've created this new introduction film for GRTGAS, and we'll watch together now. We're trying to listen to our clients, our collaborators, and we wanted to share our company, introduce our company and our common objectives and goals.
Lui, c'est David. David voit la vie en vert. Chaque jour, les fours de son site industriel fonctionnent avec du gaz. Une énergie tournée vers l'avenir, fiable et performante. Xavier aussi voit la vie en vert. Un autre vert. Avec les matières organiques issues de son exploitation agricole, il produit du biométhane qui alimente le réseau en énergie locale et renouvelable. Lui, c'est Jean-Daniel. Le bus qu'il conduit roule au gaz. Jean-Daniel le sait. Rouler au gaz émet moins de CO2 et réduit la pollution locale. Quand il était enfant, Jean-Daniel rêvait d'être marin. Eh bien, dans le monde maritime, c'est pareil. L'usage du gaz naturel liquéfié comme carburant se développe. Bruno, lui, est élu local et s'engage chaque jour pour l'avenir de son territoire. Un avenir qui se dessinera avec la transition énergétique et l'économie circulaire. Le trait d'union qui relie David, Xavier, Jean-Daniel et Bruno, ce sont les infrastructures du groupe GRTGAS. Des infrastructures qui connectent les territoires, qui évoluent en permanence pour apporter leur disponibilité et favoriser le développement des gaz renouvelables et de l'hydrogène. Ce défi mobilise des femmes et des hommes engagés dans leur mission d'intérêt général. Comme Camille qui aiguille quotidiennement les flux afin de garantir la continuité d'alimentation des consommateurs français. 365 jours par an, 24 heures sur 24. Ou Laurent qui entretient chaque jour les installations de GRTGAS et modernise le réseau, avec la sécurité comme priorité absolue dans le respect des territoires qu'il emprunte. Comme Célia, qui recherche et innove au service de l'excellence technologique, la fiabilité industrielle et le développement des gaz renouvelables. Et comme Erika, Florent et les 3000 salariés du groupe GRTGAS, qui s'engagent au quotidien pour rendre possible un avenir énergétique sûr, abordable et neutre pour le climat.
So development and renewable gases is a reality. So Matthew will say a few words about this while giving us details about what is the sector of biomethane, what is the current development, and what are the potential regulations and how will they evolve. But the new gases is not only biomethane. We just try to, we committed ourselves to try to work on all the renewable gases, for example, as created by power gasification and hydrothermal gasification. So we're just developing these actions on this topic, but we know that we have to keep on working on with our stakeholders of these sectors, and we need to also focus on hydrogen. This is where our second focus. François Martin would say a few words about the recent regulations and its rich information to share with you. So we have this overview of this, and we, as previously, you'll be able to ask all your questions, and we answer to all your questions at the end of each presentation. So feel free to share and to put your comments. Good morning, everyone. Biomethane is a growing sector. More specifically, when we look at the results of 2020, in spite of a very difficult health situation. Yes, during the 2020, we have more than 100 sites got connected to the gas network. So we have more than 214 sites now injecting biomethane in the network, and these represent 4 terawatts per hour per year. And that means we injected 2.2 terawatts per hour of biomethane in 2020. That represents an increase by 85% in 1 year. So let's talk about the forecasts. Well, the forecasts are quite good because all the portfolios in the network represent a production capacity of 26.5 terawatts per hour. And we probably have, based on our forecast, we probably have a 12 terawatts per hour of injected by 2024. And the year 2020 was marked by a lot of regulations who evolved, and where we saw, most notably, were the transitional guaranteed purchase price. So what do we have as transitional guaranteed purchase price? Because the previous price was adopted in 2012, has not been notified to the European Commission, and now it's became reality. So we have this new price in 2020. We expect it to be validated in next few months. But it's always better to have this rather than a moratorium. That was considered at one point because the government was afraid of creating a bubble, that something that happened for photovoltaic energy a few years ago. So these new transitional price is being published on the 23rd of November, and now all the contracts that were signed since then need to apply this new price. But none have been signed yet because there are more constraints now. So the guarantees of origin were also modified because 2 texts were adopted and signed on 24th of December 2020. And since then, a good application of these texts, well, the producer needs to ask the guarantees of origin based on the amount of biomethane that was injected, and must also state whether the biomethane received state aid or not. So the idea is whether the state paid to fund this biomethane. So this biomethane will be auctioned. So we have the 24th of December, the application for the contracts. By the 30th of June of 2021, all these guarantees of origin will be fully opened on the market. It means that the French producers can actually get their guarantees of origin in other countries. And then on the 1st of April, we have an opening of auctions for the guarantees of origins. Why did you wait so long? Well, because it takes some time for the units to be commissioned. So the first cubic meters of biomethane will not be injected until then. And secondly, the 1st of April 2023 has a new offer. A new contract has to be renegotiated, and the contract now belongs to GRDS, but it has to be renegotiated. And when you call for tender, so we see that the system is evolving to cope with the evolution of biomethane in France. But nonetheless, we see that the budget to support biomethane would not be enough to reach our decarbonation goals. So the French government is thinking about creating new systems and new mechanisms without having to rely too much on the national finance. So we launched discussions in order to find a solution. And this solution makes it mandatory to the manufacturers and producers to add this biomethane, and will have to be attested by what we call green certificates that will be bought directly from producers. So the anode made a counter offer that means that proposed to have this obligation to suppliers, and the DGEC already said that it will consider all the proposals. And anyway, just the articles said they were ready to do anything maybe deemed interesting. So it is a huge interest for the biomethane sector because it helps us to develop it and fund new units that are not included in this new framework. So unfortunately, it will take some time, and we won't see the effects of these new regulations until the next year or the year after. So as I said, we have a very rich portfolios, and we're sure that biomethane will keep on developing and growing in the coming years. Oh, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready to answer to all your questions. Thank you very much, Matthew, for this very thorough overview. Now, let's move on to the questions. So feel free to ask your questions. So let's start with the first question. 12 terawatts per hour. Is it a forecast, or is it just an objective based on what we have now, the production capacities we have now? It is a forecast, and it's a very good question. So we need 6.5 terawatts per hour. That must be included in the portfolios of the operators, and given the time needed to develop units, and unfortunately the potential failures and the abandonment of some projects, we had a good view of what things will happen in 2024, and based on this we can be confident to say that we'll have 12 terawatts per hour on that date. So we'll also have other contracts signed before before this new tariff, and before this new price, we have between 15 and 16 terawatts per hour in the contracts. I mean, what I want to summarize, I would say that what was our objectives about to become a reality. And second question, what are the expected evolutions for the tariff that should be validated this summer by the European Commission? Well, the great news is that will be revised annually. So now we have a tariff that is based on an average annual flow. So the new tariff would be based on an average yearly flow and consumption. It will help the shippers and to have an annual consumption and annual production. So if producer inject less during 1 month, it cannot compensate the month after. So the fact that we have tried to have an annual assessment of the tariff will help the producers to actually be able to compensate from 1 month to another. Okay, let's move on to another question. These new regulations may have forced you to review your objectives and your goals. And of Of course, yes, the answer is yes, because in 2019, we had a very exceptional year. We have less contracts and less projects in 2020. So I would say that in 2020, we come back to the levels we had in 2018. And of course, we have the new evolutions of regulations the way we expected them since 2019. But we know that in spite of all these new regulations and these modifications, we know that we still have new contracts, and we're still waiting to see what will happen in 2021. But we still feel that people want to sign contracts, and of course, we have this new mechanism we're working on. We see that the government really wants to work on injecting more biomethane and to reduce CO2 emissions. Of course, things will slow down, but unfortunately, I would say that's the same thing for renewable energy. We had the same for photovoltaic energy, for wind energy. Things will move forward in spite of all this. Thank you very much. And we also have other questions about the price of biomethane and what's at stake. So, first question, do you think that production prices will drop? Well, they won't have much choice because they have to go down, because this new price that got published in November 2022 requiring to decrease by 2% every year. And the fact that the production costs have to go down too, and we have huge challenges, and it includes the PPE, so the sector won't have any other choice to go down. And we have different stakeholders in the sector that are working on this to lower the production cost. And we have another question about what you call the green certificates. Is a huge interest for the producers, but the interest for the consumers will have to pay more for each megawatt per hour. Yes, indeed, it will be more costly. But I would say in my daily life, as soon as you decide to consume more responsibly, well, it has a cost. And the price of gas will increase for the end users. But the same thing for electricity when we had to use these new renewable sources of energy. So this is 2021, and we have to comply with these requirements to decarbonize our activities. So now we have another question. What will be the impact on the market at the GEP? We're talking about the injection of biomethane. Well, we must note that the biomethane is coming in the network as if it were coming on the GEP. I don't think it will have such a huge impact on. So, as you know, the biomethane injections are quite limited. It represents 0.5% of the consumption in France by the end of 2021. So I probably think we won't have such a huge impact in 2021. But we're working to assess the impact of renewable gases on the global system. We have other questions about what we call the extra-budgetary mechanisms. So how could you use this one? And another question is, and we also, based on the proposal of the GEC, if these proposals are adopted, will it have an impact on the guarantees of origin? So the types of units, what we're talking about is that something that will not be supported by the French government. So we're talking about projects of more than 25 to 30 gigawatts per hour and per year, which is, this is what we're talking about when we talk about the extra budgetary mechanisms. We're talking about quite big, huge sites. So now the impact of green certificates on the guarantees of origin. The guarantees of origin emitted in this framework will have their own market, and it's really difficult to now in March to really assess what the price of these green certificates. But for the auctions, well, we saw recently that the first auctions led to very low prices, and we have two schools of thought. The first one, some think that it will lead to very low prices, and other people say that it will not change much. So let's wait and see. So we have other questions about these guarantees of origin. The first one, I think you already answered partially. What will be the evolution of these guarantees of origin? And we have a more specific focus on, could we value in LNG and have a good visibility on these guarantees of origin? Oh, this is a very technical question. So we have some regulations that are being drafted or maybe being adopted about the biomethane that was not injected. So, for example, the bio LNG for mobility. And the discussions are still ongoing, so it's way too early to have conclusions about this. But it's still important to have a link with the guarantees of origin to favor and to promote biomobility. But unfortunately, I can't answer these questions because it's still being discussed. And maybe one final question. Given the number of projects, Ion, don't you think we have a congestion at the entry point? And when the unit is finally ready, shouldn't we wait too long to connect it to the network? And well, the answer is no. For the gas, most projects are located in a very specific region. It's right in the center of the Champagne region. And we get organized to have these units connected to the grid. So we have a specific team based in the city of Reims, and they was established on the 1st of January and already connected several units. So as network operators, we got organized and we make sure that we have schedules and everything will be done on time. There's no fear about this. We just do have the relevant contracts, the relevant schedules, and we're really confident that we can connect all the units on time. Thank you very much, Mathilde. It's very reassuring to see that we are fully in line and we on time. Thank you very much for answering to all these questions. I think we have a large overview on this topic, and if you have other questions, feel free to get in touch with you person of contact and to ask you questions, and we'll try to answer your questions the best way we can, even in spite of this the current situation. Like to wish you a nice day, and now let me welcome François Martin for his presentation on hydrogen. Good morning, everyone. So let's spend approximately 15 minutes on this fascinating topic of hydrogen. The purpose of this presentation is to give you an overview of the key factors and key indicators of hydrogen and which role the infrastructure play now and will play in the future. So let's have a presentation of the European context and French context, and then during the second part we'll talk about the infrastructure and the role of this infrastructure for blended hydrogen and pure hydrogen. So let's have a look at the first document was published by the European Commission. We have 3 steps. The first step is based on clusters and zones and industries of blending, of mixing, and then we have a second step based on the inclusion and interconnection of these clusters. We have networks that will connect these different clusters. And finally, we have a third step with the integration and with mature energy market that be quite close to what we have with natural gas now. And we have another document which is quite interesting, is the revision of what we call the 10E regulation, is a structure of the energy networks in Europe. And the ambition is to have a vision and how to develop these networks, these the hydrogen roads, as we call them. And we call the hydrogen backbone, and the idea of integrating all these networks to have what we call a transparent molecule and to have a fully integrated network and the relevant regulations that of course will be necessary. Another recent development by the ACER, the regulator of all regulators, and we have to have regulated markets, probably close to what we have with natural gas now. We have different steps, so we have to enhance regulation of what we have now. And the main idea behind this, published by the ASA, is to reuse the pipelines we have for natural gas for hydrogen. So this is quite interesting.
What's happening in France? Now, in France, we have this timeline which has accelerated through 2020 with one structuring element with the French strategy, financial elements, 7 billion euros to come for support for the hydrogen strategy, along with support for industry, decarbonating the industry, developing mobility as well, heavy mobility especially, and with 19% you can see for R&D as well. This has been designed with the energy climate law. There's been a document as well for hydrogen as well, the hydrogen decree, which was published in February 2021. This is, I'll quickly focus on this regulation. It includes removing colors, so renewable H2, low carbon, H2 carbonated H2. We have the definition of these different H2s. This is linked to the carbon emissions that come from the production of this type of hydrogen. You want to be able to trace the hydrogen as well. You have the carbon index to do that, which is pretty standard. You want to be able to trace it given the carbon impact, whether it's 100% or blended, along with support as well, with calls for tender in 2022. We have support mechanisms as well for production. There will be some kind of ranking for projects as well, with the lowest economic spreads that can then start to produce in 2023. If we now look at this from a network point of view at GRT Gas, we work with networks, obviously, so you need to make sure that the hydrogen production is clear. There are three means of integrating this. So with natural gas, for example, that's very interesting because natural gas networks have a lot of customers, 11 million in France, for example, connected to natural gas pipelines. So what we want to put in the system to decarbonate this, anything we can do, we need to do that. Then we have 100% hydrogen networks. It has a market value and it will have an increasing market value with the price of CO2 going up as well, which means that as the infrastructure providers, our competitive advantage is to have a network which can be converted to 100% hydrogen. We want to have a favorable impact on capex as well. The third integration method is to combine hydrogen with CO2 as well for methanation, and then you have CH4, a gas that we know and can be quickly integrated into the networks. The overview is that these three methods will be complementary and the markets will position themselves depending on the assistance, the customers, and all of this will be complementary in the future. Quick look at injection into networks. We had already spoken about this. There was a report in June 2019 about the technical conditions and economic conditions for injecting hydrogen in natural gas networks. And what we can see here, following the hydrogen deployment plan, the main points are that the natural gas network can host a hydrogen rate of a few percentage points. It needs to be confirmed because in some areas it will be more complicated, but this gives you an overall trend. One goal for 10% by 2030. There will be some limited infrastructure adaptations, discussions with the users as well, the people who are going to be receiving this. There are some steps to implement. We are making progress. The point of natural gas networks is to have a natural method for customers that are already connected so they can have decarbonated gas along their network. This slide is just to highlight that this vision of hydrogen in natural gas networks is something that's already been discussed at GRT Gas. We have 30 customers, producing customers, that we are talking to about the conditions for injecting hydrogen in natural gas networks. It's going to be quick. We're saying 2022 for this support, so the injection is probably going to be in 2023 at satellite sites so that it doesn't go throughout the network. But we do have some discussions that are well underway with some producers as well. And in the film, you saw that we are doing some tests with Jupiter 1000 in the south to see what the impact is on our pipelines and the uses downstream. Finally, I will conclude on this point. You can ask questions after this, of course. We have 100% hydrogen vision. This is a vision that has been rolled out with other transport network operators. We have a European vision. There will be some kind of model based on the savings with hydrogen from the south that will go up to consumption areas, especially in Germany, the northeast of Europe. The map on this slide shows you what the network could look like. The 100% hydrogen network, fully integrated with a transparent market, with prices that will also be transparent. And this network isn't just with the pipelines, but it's also about reconverting some pipelines as well. We're looking towards 2040 here with possible reconversions of networks, hydrogen, natural gas networks. There'll be some interaction between both as well, then an integrated system with the electrical grid as well. And gas has this asset, natural gas, hydrogen can store energy, and it can play a role in the summer-winter balances If you can store hydrogen as well, that could be advantageous with power to gas and gas to power. This is a concrete project here. The idea here is to show you very concrete steps, current discussions. The Mosaic project, for example, that's reconverting a pipeline with partners in Luxembourg, for example, and we are conducting commercial discussions with our partners about the 100% hydrogen network. Several producers who use our pipelines, and it's like what we've been doing with natural gas, non-discriminate access for producers and discussions with producers, consumers as well, with tariffication of transport as well, to take the hydrogen from where it's produced to where it will be used. Storengy discussions as well offer storage capacity to be able to use this, the gas's capacity to be stored with economic models that stem from differences between summer, winter, the intermittency of renewable energies. We're already aware of these points anyway for natural gas. But I've given you a very quick overview of the main elements for hydrogen, and I would be delighted to answer any questions. Yes, there are some questions. I can confirm that, François. You were talking about challenges relating to use compared to injection, and this is a concern that a lot of our participants share. There are several questions about this. The first is injection into natural gas, injection of hydrogen into natural gas pipelines. Is that a problem for those who use natural gas as a raw material? Can you tell us a bit more about that? Yes, what I can say is that our customers, we are talking to them about the hydrogen injection. We have a working group called the Usage Working Group, where we have institutions, associations, federations as well. It's easier to have 20 partners around the table than 700 industrial partners. But these federations, institutions, associations, we are trying to establish trends across different sectors, but obviously each industrial partner, the hundreds of industrial partners connected to the transport network in France today, they have specificities. The point is to try to make progress with unitary measures where we would like to have the impact of hydrogen on these specific areas. We have a clear vision on some of these areas. This is a European topic, though. We're not the only ones working on this in France. So for some of these areas, the hydrogen rates, acceptable rates in any case, are probably beneath 6%. And so we're also talking about how to adapt these areas, what it will cost to adapt them. It's about equipment providers as well. Discussions need to be held with on that side of things. We have tests. We want to work with industrial partners for tests, concrete tests, to try to see what the impact would be in these areas. And then we are working on the protection as well. If in these areas there is no solution, then we have to protect those customers with membranes, for example, with a view to avoiding going above unacceptable rates. Thank you, François. One question slightly related but a bit more general. Do you know whether the Jupiter 1000 RX will be done soon? All I can say about Jupiter 1000 is that we have started to have hydrogen molecules in the natural gas network in collaboration with a wider ecosystem, Jupiter 1000, and the customers downstream of Jupiter 1000 are public RECs. I can't answer that question. I don't know how frequent elements will be published, but we are trying to use this experience to make it available to customers. That's the point, the clients, the consumers, customers, so that in this usage, the working group usage will help us to go more in depth to show that the exchanges that we are putting forward are acceptable in terms of the science. Thank you. There are several questions about the economic side of things. You might not be able to give us a perfect vision of what the future will look like, but we're putting hydrogen into the natural gas network, isn't that a waste of value?
On parle beaucoup de ces business models qui émergent.
We talk about
L'hydrogène, il est
emerging
décarboné.
business
Il a une
models quite a
valeur
lot. Hydrogen
de
is
décarbonation
carbon
du cycle.
free.
Il a une
It
valeur,
adds a decarbonation
une fois qu'il
factor,
est
and the
injecté
value,
dans le réseau
once it's
gazier,
been
le réseau gazier
injected
ce que
into the
fait,
gas
il a
network,
cette
the gas
capacité à
network, like
absorber
what I was
aujourd'hui
saying,
de
it has this
l'hydrogène
ability to
et
absorb
probablement,
hydrogen.
temporairement, pour la
And
mise en place de production massive, les réseaux vont
for
avoir
the
un rôle
implementation of
clé.
mass
Dans
production,
ce
the
sens où il faut
networks will
trouver des
play a
exutoires.
key
Aujourd'hui,
role,
les exutoires hydrogène,
whereby
le business
you
model est en
need
train de se construire. L'hydrogène a une valeur.
to
Donc,
find
disons que
outlets. Hydrogen has a
l'injection dans les
value. It's
réseaux,
being worked
probablement,
on.
on
So
est sur quelque chose qui va
injection
trouver
into
un
the
équilibre, mais quelque chose
network
possiblement
is
temporaire
something that
avant
will
que
find
les
its own
clients
balance, but it
voient une
might be
valeur
temporary
à
until
l'achat d'hydrogène
customers
qui, là,
see
pour le
the
coup,
value
a
in
un prix
purchasing hydrogen
qui est un prix
at a
aujourd'hui en termes
price
de, si on le convertit en
that,
valeur,
if you convert it
en prix au
into the
mégawatt, c'est un
actual
prix qui est largement
value,
supérieur
price per megawatt,
au
which
gaz
is
naturel.
better
Mais
than
voilà, là
natural
encore,
gas, higher
le
than
business
natural
model est en
gas,
train de
but
se monter et l'argent injecté, on parlait de
the
7
business
milliards,
model is
ces 7
being
milliards, ils vont nous
developed. We're
montrer la
talking about 7
capacité
billion in investment. This
de cette
shows the
production d'hydrogène
ability
à faire
of
des économies
hydrogen
d'échelle, à
production
innover et à amener un
to
hydrogène
have
à un coût
large
entendable. Donc,
scale savings
injection dans
to
les réseaux, ça me
provide
paraît indispensable
hydrogen.
tant que les
Injection
exutoires ne
into
sont pas
network, I
clairs,
believe, is
capacité
indispensable
du système à
since the
absorber,
outlets aren't yet
réseau dédié
clear
quand le
cut. When
business model sera
network can
entendable des
absorb,
clients, baisse des coûts de
and then
production,
we want
augmentation de la valeur du
feedback from
CO2,
customers,
tout ça doit
decrease in
s'équilibrer.
the production costs
Alors,
and
une
better
question plus en
CO2,
lien avec justement
etc. It should
notre
all balance
propre
out. A question
système
linked
régulé et
to
nos tarifs.
our
Une
system and
préoccupation de
tariffs.
nos expéditeurs par rapport à la
The
prise en
shippers'
compte des
concerns
investissements
about
hydrogène que fait GRT Gaz.
the hydrogen investment
Ces
from
coûts
GRT
d'investissement
Gas.
GRT Gaz
This
seront-ils
investment,
pris en compte dans les tarifs de
will this
transport
investment
ou
be taken
comment
into
peut-on
account in
s'assurer
the shipping
qu'ils en seront bien séparés?
tariffs? How can we
Y
make
a-t-il des
sure that they will
discussions en
be
cours avec l'AXO et la
separate from this?
DGEC?
Are there
Je
any
ne sais pas si
current
tu as des
discussions
éléments.
with the
Peut-être
CRE and
Thierry
the
pourra aussi
DGCC?
compléter
I don't know if you
en
have anything to say
conclusion de
about that.
cette
Maybe
matinée.
Thierry can add
Peut-être effectivement,
something
il y
about
a un
that as
sujet
well when he
évidemment
concludes the
régulatoire. Alors
morning.
il est français, il est
Well,
européen.
obviously, there's a regulatory
Aujourd'hui, il
side
y a
of
des
things in
positionnements qui
France
sont en
and
train de se
Europe.
faire. Il y a des positionnements dans les différentes. On parlait de
Advances are
l'ACER,
being made,
voilà,
different
l'ENSOG.
positions. We're talking about
Donc tout ça
the
est en
NSOG,
construction. Aujourd'hui,
STER. All of this is underway.
nos investissements, en
Currently,
particulier si
our
on prend un projet comme
investment,
Mosaïque, aujourd'hui, c'est des
particularly
investissements
if you look
qui
at a
ne sont
project
pas
like
décidés et
Mosaic, this investment
évidemment qui seront
isn't
discutés
yet
avec l'écosystème pour
fully
voir
decided, and it's an
comment on les
exchange that we
prend
will
et
have with the ecosystem to see
qui
what
doit
should be
être
done,
informé de ces prises de
who
décision-là.
needs to be informed of the
Merci
decisions.
François. Peut-être encore
Thank you,
quelques
François.
rapides
I don't know
minutes
if we
pour d'autres
have
questions. Elles sont
any
nombreuses.
minutes left
Des
for the
questions
questions. I've
toujours
received quite a
par
lot of them,
rapport
but
aux usages.
questions mainly
Avec
relate
quel préavis les
to
consommateurs seront-ils
usage.
prévenus du changement de mix du gaz reçu et
How
par quel biais?
long ahead will
Bon,
consumers be
donc
told about the change in their
ça,
gas mix, and how
il
will
y a
they
un
be
autre
told?
sujet sous-jacent qui est la variabilité du taux
There is
d'hydrogène.
another underlying
Dans
topic
les
here, which is the
discussions qu'on a
variability of the hydrogen rates. In the
avec nos
discussions that
partenaires,
we have
comme je
currently
disais,
with
fédérations,
partners,
associations,
like I was
instituts,
saying,
ce
federations,
sujet est un
associations,
sujet
institutions, etc., this is
structurant pour nos
something
clients.
that we
Donc,
talk about as a
évidemment
structuring element
qu'on
with our
pense que la
customers. And so
stabilité des taux, c'est un
we
des
think
enjeux qu'on
that
doit
the
respecter.
stability
Je
of
disais
rates
probablement
is a
développement sur
challenge
les
that we need
antennes.
to
Donc, on
respect. I said we
pousse
would
pour
be
une
using satellite
stabilité
sites
de la
first.
qualité
So
du
we
gaz,
want
y
to
compris
push
avec
for the
un taux
stability of
d'hydrogène qui arrive chez nos
gas
clients.
quality with
Maintenant, si
hydrogen
cet enjeu
getting to our customers'
devient un
premises.
enjeu
If this
lié
challenge
au fait
becomes
qu'on injecte plus
something
massivement
that's
sur des
linked
réseaux qui sont plus
to
interconnectés, oui,
interconnected
on
injection
a
onto
dans les
interconnected
projets cette
networks,
idée de la
then
qualité gaz,
we have
l'impact
planned
sur le PCF,
to
l'impact sur le VOB, savoir
ensure
anticiper ces impacts et savoir
the
surtout le communiquer à
quality
nos
of the
clients. Donc
gas,
oui, c'est
and it
embarqué.
will send that
Aujourd'hui,
to our
on est plus
customers.
dans
This
un
is something we've
positionnement de
taken into
stabilité du taux
account.
sur des
We were
antennes
more
qui
about
nous
the
permet pour nos
stability
clients
of the
d'avoir une qualité
rates in these
relativement stable
sites that
à
enable
partir du
our
moment où on
customers
injecte
to
de
have
l'hydrogène.
stable quality when you are
Des
injecting
questions
hydrogen.
ensuite sur l'intérêt
Now
de
we also
l'HVO
have some
produit par
questions
électrolyse
about
versus l'électrification des procédés
electrolysis
et
produced
du
H2
coup
compared to
un point
different
qui revient,
processes. And something relating to this, the issue of the high cost of electrolysis hydrogen. Has this been taken into account? Well, a similar question would be, is it better to have a hydrogen network or an electrical network? And there are documents being published, documents that have been published on a Europe scale. It's better to have the hydrogen network. In terms, we're not saying it. It's independent. Researchers have said this. Another argument is it better to centralize production? We were talking about the high cost of hydrogen, so centralizing production, putting it into the networks, using the flexibility of the networks, instead of having it done at the sites differently. A megawatt electrolyzer takes 100 square meters. This is industrial scale, really. A gas network for hydrogen is very interesting. Electrifying the processes compared to using hydrogen, compared to using renewable gases, compared to using biomass. This is something that has economic sense with the CO2 that you save. Each customer needs to make their own calculations. For example, we were saying, where is hydrogen going to go? Where is it valuable today? Well, today, steel, for example, is probably one of the areas where hydrogen could be valuable enough to think about investments. There are some customers who can see the value of this already, and it's up to the customers to decide what is best for them to decarbonate their system. And we will make sure that we can have hydrogen, renewable gases. We need to be able to provide that to our customers directly with centralized production models. Okay. I don't think we're going to be able to ask all of these questions. I'm going to ask you one last question, which will be quite quick to answer. When you're talking about the percentage of hydrogen in gas, is this volume, mass, or energy? Volume. Okay, thank you, François. There are some questions about building a pure H2 network, but I think we should come back to that later on. But we can see that it is a topic that is on everybody's mind, and we can probably come back to that later. So I would like to thank you, François, for this first overview about hydrogen. And now I'm going to give the floor to Thierry Trouvé. Good morning, Thierry. I wanted to thank you for being with us today. To start, I would like to ask you whether there are 2 or 3 particular elements that caught your attention this morning. Good morning, Caroline. Good morning, everybody. And I'm delighted to be here with you today, even if it is remotely. The things that have caught my attention, firstly, for 2020, we need to remember the TRF. It worked well, efficient localized spread, and we've done our job as well, because 2020, with a competitive marketplace in Europe, and at the end of the year, where we had tension on the networks, and LNG going to Asia, China, Spain had a spike, and we managed to remain in line with that, which was important for the consumers to the south of France. The other point that I think is important is the efforts that have been deployed, the willingness that we have shown to always try to minimize the impact of any work carried out, which isn't always easy. We are in the face of toughening up of regulations. Regulations are becoming more complicated for our work, which means that we have to do more than we did before. And about work as well is the importance of our information system, the work that we are doing currently for our IT system. We are very aware of your expectations, better ergonomics, better interface. And so the work that we have shown you about the in-grid portal is something that is working towards that. We all saw the new business card for GRT gas, talks about greening gas, innovation, and different uses as well. Is this a new position for GRT gas? Well, yes, obviously. You just have to look at what the press is saying. We are currently in a world marked by the Green Deal, global warming, the fight against global warming, Green Deal, effort towards the energy transition and carbon-free world. Therefore, we think that gas have an important role to play, and I say gas have an important role to play in the energy transition, particularly with its smart complementarity between gases and electricity. This, for us, gas producers, it involves greening the gas. Gas is still there, still present, but it will be green gases or carbon neutral gases. And we firmly believe that in the end, the infrastructure partners, us, our employees, people with GRT gas, have a vital role to play to support this transformation. Innovation as well, as you mentioned, this is crucial. The transition towards a carbon-free world, whether it's for electricity or for gas, requires technology that aren't well known or available today. So we need to be able to work on research and innovation with a view to putting in place these new technologies so that we can reach our final goal. Our research center is an asset in this direction. We are investing to support the production of renewable gases in the country, to also think about the energy mix of the future, working with our customers on their needs, what their carbon-free thoughts are, and how we can help them achieve these goals. Therefore, this is something that we do with our local partners, and it is within this partnership that we have created a fundamental purpose for GRT gas that we will be revealing very soon. Thierry, you've said too much or not enough. You are with our customers. Can you maybe give us a preview of this fundamental purpose? I don't know if I'm allowed to, but I'm going to count on you to not tell anybody else. We're going to be making it public in a few days. But our fundamental purpose is that together we can make a secure, affordable, and climate-neutral energy future possible. Do I have some time to go into detail about that? Well, it means that we are working together. We can't do it alone. It's also about having a carbon-neutral future for the climate. This is a turning point, like I was mentioning a moment ago, and we want this neutral energy be secure. These are our fundamentals. It needs industrial security, supply security, and it also needs to be affordable as well, because if it isn't affordable, it just won't happen. Therefore, it should be secure, affordable, climate neutral. It needs to make this possible. This is our belief. There is no energy transition without smart complementarity between electricity and gases and heat as well. That's what our fundamental purpose says. We have been working on this for 18 months to try to develop this fundamental purpose alongside our stakeholders and with some of you as well. We asked some of you, and I would like to thank you for that now. The fundamental purpose is here to be a contract that joins us to our stakeholders, our customers, employees, etc. And in concrete terms, how will this play out in the company? In concrete terms, while we've been developing this fundamental purpose in 2020, we worked on a new company project for the next 4 years. I won't go into a presentation of this company project, but just bear in mind that there are two main aspects, which is rolling out natural gas relays, and this involves building customer loyalty, rolling out new gas usages. We've spoken about that this morning. And then secondly, more internal. Well, it's external as well, but we want to reinvent our jobs and practices, especially increasing performance as well. The actions that we have implemented include our goal to provide proof of our vision in concrete terms, to illustrate what we want to achieve. So I just want to give you two examples to make it more concrete. First is the convention that we signed with the Port of Dunkirk. In Dunkirk, there is a lot of heavy industry. With Arcelor, for example, it's looking to decarbonize its steel production, the first in Europe to do so. One of the levers is to use carbon capture to do this. We have signed with this port an agreement which aims to create a CO2 hub, and we believe that we can provide know-how to this end. The second example I would like to use relates to the presentation that François has just given you on hydrogen. He showed you about the European backbone, the study that we published in the middle of last year. We have identified a future need. I say future need, not for next year, but a coming need for infrastructure in France with a hydrogen network from Fos-sur-Mer to the German border. We have identified this because it's a project that we have started to design, and we have spoken to a lot of different stakeholders, and we have received 23 support letters for this project. The goal in the long term is to create 700 kilometers of pipelines dedicated to hydrogen, some with new work and some with the existing sites that will be reconverted to host hydrogen. Okay, so we're reaching the end of this meeting. Do you think that there are any more important dates to come in the coming months with our customers? Okay, I'll just talk about one then. And this relates to hydrogen as well. This is the hydrogen consultation that are going to be starting very soon. The goal of this is to widen the development needs for hydrogen, infrastructure development needs especially as well, like we have been doing for years for natural gas. And we started this, I spoke about Hyphen. This is something we started in 2020. We want to shift gears up and talk about needs, to be able to identify them so that we can plan and design the future hydrogen structures that our country will need and that Europe will need. The idea that we have here is to do this on a recurring basis like we do today for natural gas. Thank you, Thierry. Customers, especially our stakeholders, are at the heart of GRT Gas's projects for the future. And I think in terms of commercial department, we are delighted with that. We're reaching the end of our Shippers meeting. We know that this digital format doesn't necessarily respond to everybody's needs, but we hope nevertheless that it has enabled you to have a good understanding of what's happening with our offer and the projects that we have together. We would like to know your satisfaction as well. So I will ask you to give us your opinion on the Shippers meeting in the pop-up that will pop up one last time on your screen. So I'm being waved at from the behind the stage. I forgot that you can ask some questions. I thought we had run out of time, but apparently we still have a little bit of time left. So I'll ask the questions from the participants on this.
Are we sure that a mix with gas is necessary? And why do you think the French government may not agree with this while trying to discourage people from using gas in their houses? Well, it's obvious for us that we have a complement, something that goes together. Electricity and gas go together, and the European Commission agrees, and this is common sense. But I think no electrician would be able to explain how we can cope with this new, the evolution of the different sources of energy. When you have a cold wave on Europe and we don't have too much sun, how can we store energy massively without using gas? So this is obvious to me. This is common sense. So why are we now in a situation where we have this potential environmental regulation for 2021? Well, I think that is the French government is a shareholder at 85% in the main energy providers in France. It may be a good explanation, good reason why they want to do so. Thank you very much. So maybe may ask the question that other people wanted to ask, but I think we reached the end of this meeting. So once again, I will tell you once again that it's important to know if you're satisfied by this meeting, and I will encourage you to give your opinion. I would like to thank all the organizers and all the speakers for being here, for having organized this meeting, and I would like to thank you all for, in the name of our teams, for being here. And I would like to meet you again next year. We'll wish you a nice day. Thank you very much.